I apologize, my CV is longer than my talk. Let's begin with a prayer to Our Lady. In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Our Lady, seat of wisdom, pray for us. In the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
When we began the weekend, 3 objectives were placed before you. The first was social. It's an opportunity to make new friends, meet new people. A reminder that you're not alone, that we are in this together. Secondly, intellectual, so that you might gain new knowledge or consolidate the knowledge you already have about the faith. And thirdly, the most important, it will be a personal encounter with Christ. And we make this personal encounter, first of all, in interacting with each other. Secondly, by listening to the words of our Lord speaking to us in the scriptures at Mass. And thirdly, by encountering Him directly in the sacraments. So if you've fulfilled these 3, then for you this weekend is a success. It has laid the foundation of what you will be doing, please God, for the rest of your lives. Meeting Christ and being the vehicle by which others can meet Him. The talk I've been asked to give is entitled Natural Law and Common Sense. When we hear the word law, immediately we panic. It sounds as if someone is trying to control us. But law and nature go together. You cannot separate the two. Individual things have a nature. And when we speak about nature, we are essentially speaking about purpose. So, for instance, if we speak about a train, what is it? It's a vehicle for transporting people or goods. But it has a law that determines its behavior. If you put the train on the road, it's not going to go anywhere. It needs metal tracks on which to run. In the same way, a car will run efficiently if it's on a hard surface. But if you put it on sand or in a swamp, it's not going to go anywhere because we have violated the law of its nature. Everything then has a nature, and the nature is constrained to behave in a particular way. There are different kinds of laws. Of course, the most in the natural order, for me, the most important laws are the laws of mathematics. I'm sure you will agree. And the one law we all know is Pythagoras' theorem. Everybody knows that. What does it mean though? That's the problem. We know by definition that in a right angle triangle, the square of the two sides is equal, the sum of the square of the two sides is equal to the square on the hypotenuse. Okay, we know that, but what does it mean? It's very simple. It means that if you have a square on one side of the triangle and a square on the other, you know the areas of those two squares, you add them together, it will give you the same result as the square on the third side. And that's essentially what it means. But it's a law that is established for every single right-angled triangle, without exception. So once you see right-angled triangle, you know what the law is. When you add the law, you know what the triangle is. There are other kinds of laws, the laws of physics. If you drop an object, what will happen? it will fall. Why? Because it's a law called gravity. However, you can also drop an object and it will go up. A helium balloon. Yes? Why? Because there's another law superior to gravity called density. And because the balloon is lighter, it will overcome gravity. So we see there's a hierarchy of laws. If you mix oil and water together and let it settle, the oil will float to the top because of the law of density. In biology, there are also laws. There's a law of digestion, respiration, reproduction. There are other kinds of laws, such as geotropic laws. And there is phototropic laws. What are those? If you take a seed and you plant it in the ground, it doesn't make any difference whether you plant it the right way up or upside down. Once it starts to germinate, the root will go down, even if the root's at the top, it will go down. That's why it's called geotropic, going down. And the buds, the stem, will go upwards towards the light. It's called phototropic, moving to the light. And it doesn't make any difference how you plant. So there are laws which govern germination of seeds. But what I've talked about so far is essentially the laws of nature, which is different from the natural law. And I'll explain why. The laws of nature help us to classify creatures. Okay, so you look at a particular animal, let's say a bird. What is a bird?
It has wings.
It has wings, very good. What else does it have?
Is that like, how do you call it? I don't know how.
A beak?
Yes, thank you. And that's
Okay.
pretty much it.
And that's it?
Oh, you have picnics, they don't.
2 legs?
Oh yeah, 2 legs, yeah. Like, but some have
Okay.
1 leg, and they still are birds, so.
Okay, some have 1 leg. They're still birds. But notice there are different kinds of birds. There are birds that fly and birds that don't fly, but they both have wings. There are birds that swim and there are those that don't swim. Okay? There are those that eat seeds and those that eat flesh. There are those that run and those that don't run. So there are all kinds of birds, but we recognize that there are some essential characteristics, basic qualities by which we can classify a bird. Okay? There are mammals that fly, like the bat, for instance, but it's not a bird. Okay? And so on. We have penguins. They have wings, they have legs, don't fly, but they swim very well, which a sparrow will not do. So then the laws prove that because of this, because we can classify creatures according to these characteristics, we can say that the laws prove that there is order in nature. If there weren't order, there'd be just chaos. And we couldn't classify anything at all. Everything would be random. Hence, we can deduce what a thing is and what purpose it has because there is law, because there is order in nature. So in general, things are made up of parts, and each part has its own purpose. So a living creature has a purpose, namely to eat, to grow, and to reproduce. That's the purpose of creatures. But the creatures are made up of parts. So for instance, it has eyes with which to see, ears with which to hear. So even the parts have a purpose. If a part is defective, that does not mean that there is a problem with nature. It simply means there's a problem with this particular individual. But not that there's a problem with nature. Because nature in itself, because it comes from God, is perfect. So then, if there's a defect, we can correct it. So if the eyes are bad, we wear glasses. Okay? It's as simple as that. There are things which, of course, do not have eyes, like stones. But they don't need eyes, do they? So it's not a defect for them. In other words, everything has all that it needs for it to be what it is. Okay. But let us look at the kinds of creatures that exist in general. It's a dark night. In the middle of the night, you're woken up by a sound. What do you say? It's some kind of sound. You say, what is that? Agree? Because it could be the wind blowing. It could be a branch of a tree resting against the window. It could be a dog scratching. It could be a mouse eating your best linen. Okay? You don't know what it is. So you ask, what is that? What made that sound? And the answer will describe the nature of the source of the sound. So, what is that? Someone coughing. Okay? What is that? Someone knocking. Now, if you recognize the cough or the knock, you don't ask what, because you already know the nature. You ask who, because you recognize the nature, and you recognize it's a human being, and therefore that human being has personality, and you want to know which one of the 7 billion people in the planet is knocking at your door or making this noise. And so we see that nature, creation, is divided into 2 basic categories. First of all, there's the non-living. Okay, so we have stones, we have water, we have mountains, we have sand, all of these things. They do not have life. And then we have the creatures that do have life, namely the animate or the living creatures. And these creatures are divided into 2 categories. The first category is the irrational creatures, animals basically. And the second are the rational creatures. What is the difference between the 2? Among the irrational creatures, we have, first of all, plants, grass, flowers, vegetables. And these have, because they have a nature, they have a purpose. What is the purpose of the grass, or the vegetables, or the flowers? Essentially, to take in nutrition, to grow, and to reproduce. And that's it. They're now ready to be eaten. And this is where the next highest level of creatures comes in, namely the animals. The animals have to do exactly the same thing as the plants. They need to eat, they need to grow, and they need to reproduce. But animals are given an extra characteristic, namely, they are aware of their environment. to see, be able to hear, be able to touch, to feel. Okay? And they have all the senses. So they essentially are sensory animals, sensory creatures. They're able to move about, and they do that either by walking, by flying, or by swimming. So they are able to, if you like, explore their environment. And then you have, at the peak, at the top, the rational creature, the human being, us. We can do, and indeed we do exactly the same thing as the plants and the animals. We need nourishment, so we eat, we grow, we reproduce. We're also aware of our environment. Okay, so we see, we hear, we taste, we touch, we smell. But we have something added to this, which animals do not have. We have reason. We are able to know things as separate from ourselves. We are able to know things objectively. We have an intellect. We're able to know. We also have a will. This gives us the ability to choose between the various options available to us. These options being presented to us by the intellect. To give you an example, among the birds, the various species of birds, they build their nests according to the kind of bird that they are. So you'll find the gulls will build their nests over cliffs, overlooking the sea. The sparrows, who don't like that kind of rough environment, will build their nests in trees. Ostriches, which can't fly, don't bother to build a nest, they just leave the egg somewhere in the desert. The kiwi, which is a bird, doesn't fly, doesn't see very well, it will find a little hole and to lay its eggs there. But the point I want to make is that each bird, according to its species, will build its nest in exactly the same way. A bird wouldn't say, I think it's time to have a little chimney stack. Won't do that. Or I think I should have an extension because I'm going to have more chicks this year. They don't do that. They build a nest exactly the same way so that we, as scientists, can go, we can look at the nest 10 years later, 20 years later, he can say, oh, this belongs to this species. The same with spiders. Spiders build their webs in the same way according to species. They don't become inventive or creative or say, I want to do it differently. They don't do that. We do. We can conceive a house, my ideal house, and we will build it according to what we have conceptualized. It will reflect our personality, not our nature, but our personality. But that is because we have an intellect, we are creative. Now, we also have a will, which is, as I said, is able to choose between the various options. So we can ask the question, since nature is attached to purpose, why is this thing built this way and not that? We can ask, well, what is the purpose of our intellect? Why did nature, I prefer to think of God, why did nature give us an intellect? And the answer is very simple. To know the truth. That's what we were created for, to know the truth. A truth that our Lord tells us to make us free. And why did He give us a will? So that we can follow that truth wherever it leads. Now, it's very interesting, and this is really an aside. In the story of the creation, When God placed our first parents in the garden, He gave them a commandment. Or rather, He gave Adam a commandment. You see that tree in the middle of the garden? Don't touch it. Don't eat it. That's the commandment. But God is good, and God wants what's best for us. He gave a reason. The day you eat of it, you will die the death. So Adam knew the consequences of disobedience. Along comes the serpent. The serpent doesn't go to Adam. He goes to Eve. And he speaks with her. Unfortunately, she engaged him in conversation. Don't speak to snakes. No, it's not good. Eve listened to the serpent because she saw the fruit was good to eat, pleasing to the eyes, desirable for the knowledge it would give. She ate, and then she gave to her husband who ate. Now, St. Paul tells us that Adam was not deceived. The woman was deceived. She herself said so. When God asked her, "What have you done?" She said, "The serpent deceived me. He led me astray. He captured my intellect." Adam was not deceived. Adam disobeyed. He saw that nothing happened. And so he, with full knowledge, he averted his will to disobeying God. So this is why we're suffering, not for the fault of Eve, which is one of the intellect, but one of the will. Adam's disobedience. By one man's sin, one man's disobedience, sin entered into the world. And that's why it was necessary, when God was going to restore creation, when God was going to recreate, the angel came to the woman, our Blessed Lady, and asked her, will she give to God a son? Her intellect, she thought, she pondered, is this a deception? The angel convinced her it was no deception, and she consented. The Word became flesh, Christ is born, and He is going to be the one to repair the disobedience of Adam. So when we have devotion to Our Lady, we are essentially asking her always to enlighten our intellect, seat of wisdom, mother of good counsel. Enlighten our intellects so we might understand these truths. So then, coming back to law, we have the laws of nature which govern irrational beings, and we have the natural law which governs rational beings, us. So we can ask the question, well, what is the law? And by definition, law is an ordinance according to reason. A law must be reasonable, established by one in authority for the sake of the common good. That's a general definition. Rational beings, which is what we are, we have the intellect, so we are able to discover the reason or the purpose for which things exist. In the days in which we live, in our time, there's a great confusion about the gift of reproduction. There's a problem, there's a great confusion about the purpose of sex, essentially. And yesterday we heard the sad news how our island has joined the rest of the Western world in being utterly unreasonable. So we ask the question, we have intellects, what is the purpose of sex. Why does nature give to creatures, living creatures, the power of sex? What's its purpose? Reproduction. That's its fundamental purpose, to reproduce. Everything that lives, eats, grows, reproduces. The higher the creature is, then the more characteristics or gifts that are added, such as locomotion or sensing, and in us, intellect. So essentially, and this is how we reason it out, if which it is, sex is for reproduction, then necessarily sex must also be heterosexual. Because two beings of the same sex cannot reproduce themselves. So there must be complementarity. One must mesh into the other. People have sex for many reasons. In our age, for pleasure. And in itself, that's not wrong, in itself. Nature has given us the pleasure so as to encourage us to multiply, to procreate. Because if there were no pleasure in it, we wouldn't do it. But that's not the only reason that people have sex. They also have sex for money, for power, for love, even for revenge. There's a book called Dangerous Relationships, which describes how a woman concocts this fantastic plan to destroy a rival, and she does it simply by having various men have sex with her rival, and then she exposes her. I mean, that shows a kind of how twisted we can be. We can use something good to achieve an evil end. So there are many reasons why people have sex. In the same way, there are many reasons why we eat. For pleasure. But is that nature's reason for giving us taste buds? No. It's so that we would eat things that would nourish us. Nature's purpose is, in eating, nourishment. But she encourages us to do this by giving us a pleasure attached to it. And the same way for reproduction. Nature makes it very difficult to indulge in sex without procreation. Nature simply is not sterile, in other words. And we have evidence of this in that contraception at some point will fail. There is no contraception that's 100% efficient, with the exception of sterilization. Mathematically, there's always be some little fraction of a percent. And that little fraction of percent will mathematically occur at some point. Okay? That is why we have the problem today. Because most people think that contraception is safe. There's no way you can procreate, that you can get pregnant. But of course, just looking at the abortion numbers, or looking at what has happened in Ireland, if contraception were 100% effective, there would be no need for abortion. The fact that there is need for abortion indicates that it's not 100% safe. So then nature wants us to multiply, and for very good reason. And Charles Darwin tells us why. Because he says that the fittest survive. He has a theory of the survival of the fittest. So of course, the more samples you have of any group, the better chance you have of selecting the best. So nature necessarily is fertile and wants to reproduce. We can say it in a different way. God is infinitely good. And he wants to manifest his goodness in new creatures, especially us who are made in his own image and likeness. So in a very real way, each and every one of us is an expression of God's nature. We are an expression, a concrete, finite, but nonetheless a concrete expression of some part, not part, because that's not part, of God himself. This is why it's so valuable. Each and every one is valuable. Each and every one of us expresses God in today's world. We express God to each other. We encounter God in each other. So then, we have reproduction as a consequence. When we look again at nature, when we look at the animals, birds, fish, what do we notice? They reproduce. You will find that generally the male disappears. Sometimes the male dies, as in the case of insects. The male dies, and the female is left to raise the offspring, the young. In some cases, the male may hang around for a while. Okay, as for instance in canine creatures. Or the male may have a whole host of females, as in a herd. And he'll be around, not for the one individual female, but for the whole herd. But with us, it's not like that. Because in the case of animals, fish, birds, the young grow very quickly. And within a few months, the adults, they're able to look after themselves. The elephant, I think, it takes about 3 years for a calf to become mature. And that's about the longest. But at 3 years old, we are not capable of looking after ourselves, are we? At 6 years, we're not capable of looking after ourselves. And some with 26 are still not capable of looking after themselves. Right? It takes us a long time. So God provided something else. If it's going to take a long time for us to mature, to become adults, it means that the mother is going to have, because nature insists on multiplying itself. If a woman has many children, she's going to be overburdened, overwhelmed, if she were on her own. And that's why God provided man, a husband, to look after his family. And we call that relationship marriage. The expectation is, in nature, that the male will be around to protect the female. This is one of the reasons that men tend to be very jealous. They're very protective of what belongs to them. It's an instinct that's inbuilt to protect the family. But what happens when you have contraception? Immediately you've driven, as Pope Paul VI made clear, you've driven a cleft between what God himself has joined together. And so you have basically separation. So the man goes one way and the woman's left alone with the children. So then, God has established, nature has made it necessary that there be a relationship that is permanent, that is long-lasting, which we call marriage. And the purpose is that a man and a woman together will produce the children, not only begetting them physically, but also begetting them spiritually, morally, and culturally. So the purpose of marriage is not just begetting children biologically, but ensuring that they are trained intellectually, spiritually, culturally, socially, so that each and every child can be a productive and useful member of the society in which we live. So, what is required? There has to be an affection. And so we have a spousal affection between a man and his wife. This is necessary to establish the stability of the union. If there isn't this mutual affection, this mutual love, then the relationship becomes unstable. Many people would prefer just the sexual relationship or even the companionship without children. But nature's purpose is the begetting of children, procreation. So regardless of how we feel or what we want, the question we have to ask, the common sense question is, what is the purpose of marriage? It is essentially the begetting of children, and as the church teaches us, the begetting and education of children. And the education doesn't mean maths. Although it's very good. That's not all. It's essentially for us to be able to know the truth. The education is instructing the intellect. Know the truth. Love the truth. Follow the truth. And indeed be ready to die for the truth. When we reach this point, we call it morality. Morality consists essentially in behaving in accordance with human nature. Animals don't have that problem. Animals do what they have to do instinctively. We, on the other hand, have to use our reason and our will to do that which is according to our nature. To give you an example, there's a fire. A bird has built its nest on the rooftop. There's a fire. No bird will come and rescue its young. It won't do it. It will stand very sadly and watch the fire consume its young. But a man, a father or a mother, seeing the house on fire and knowing their child's inside, will risk their life and go in and save the child. Because we have the choice. We see, we understand what's happening, we can make a choice, and we can sacrifice ourselves for the one we love. A man can have no greater love than to lay down his life for his friends. Because we have a will, we're free. Of course, we're not always able to do what we know to be right. We can deliberately do something wrong, knowing it is wrong. Either because of weakness, or some addiction, or sometimes even quite deliberately, out of malice. But we still know it is wrong, and that's what's important. The danger comes when we deny that something is wrong. That's when we're in trouble. It's a sin against the Holy Spirit to call evil good and good evil. And this is what we're facing today, where people will regard what they know to be wrong, the killing of human beings, and call it a good thing to do. So then, we as human beings are rational and social animals. Each one of us has an end established for us by nature. These ends that we have, we can only achieve if we're not stopped by someone else, if we're not impeded. And this gives us, therefore, what we call rights. So we all have the fundamental right to life. No one should take our life. No one should willfully kill us for any reason. That's a basic right. We have a right to liberty. We should be free. Nobody should enslave us. We should be free to determine our destiny according to the plan of God and so on. Any sexual act, abortion attacks these three ends. The natural end of sex, which is procreation. It attacks the parental instinct to protect its offspring. And lastly, it attacks the life of the innocent. So abortion violates at least three rights at the very beginning. And so, as Pope Paul VI said, Any sexual act that is anti-procreation is essentially, intrinsically immoral. If it is anti-procreation, it is immoral. And just to conclude, there's a quote by Sigmund Freud. He says, "It is a characteristic common to all perversions that, in them, reproduction as an aim is put aside. This is actually the criterion by which we judge whether a sexual activity is perverse, if it departs from reproduction in its aims and pursues the attainment of gratification independently." And this by an important psychologist, the father of psychology. He recognized even then that the whole purpose of sex is procreation. That is, to make God ever more present in our world. Are you the seat of wisdom? Pray for us. Thank you.